The government now has support for its policies. Government credibility will be given to government fiscal policy measures that they put in place, because the IMF will serve as a police officer to guide the process and to monitor that things are done well.
Public Utilities Regulatory Commission urges utility consumers to accept 18% tariff adjustment amid exchange rate and inflationary factors.
Knowing very well that times are rough for everybody, both the consumer and the utility service provider. So in the wisdom of the commissioners, they think that, look, even though the tariffs are supposed to be at 100% at a particular level, we should pay 50%, and 50% is the 18.36% that we are paying.
Also coming up, Supreme Court orders removal of James Gyakye as Asin North MP following a judgment.
James Gyakye was not qualified under the dictates of the Constitution of the Republic to have contested as a member of Parliament for the Asin North constituency.
And later, police investigate brutal attack on New Jabin Senior High School by Kufodia Senior High Technical School students.
They also destroyed 2 of our Rambo 800 polytanks that used to serve the boys and some of the masters. They've destroyed them completely, as well as the sick bay was also under siege. Vandalized properties, the roofs of about 3 bungalows around. They were destroying stones, and the roof is just the slate type. So any stone that is, we just break it up.
Thank you for joining us this morning. The show is interactive, and so we'd like to hear from you via WhatsApp and, of course, live on YouTube at CityTube. You can also tweet at us using the hashtag CNR Extra on Twitter. This morning, I'm in studio with Hansen Ajiman. Good morning.
Good morning, Anna.
It's a rainy Thursday morning.
It is.
What was the route to the office like for you?
Well, I think it was quite okay. I mean, from Awoshe through La Paz, through the main Achimota Road, I think pretty much is okay. But I'm told some other places of Accra, as usual, have experienced flooding, and it's difficult for people to commute. And it's important that viewers are careful when they move about.
Great stuff. And of course, you would want to exercise some caution, some restraints while applying the various routes you apply to your various workplaces or even your various destinations. We're starting off the show on a good note because the executive board of the International Monetary Fund has given Ghana some sigh of relief with respect to that $3 billion bailout request we made to them.
The Executive Board of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, has granted approval for Ghana's $3 billion bailout request aimed at revitalizing the country's struggling economy. The decision was made during the Executive Board's meeting held on Wednesday, following Ghana's receipt of financial assurances from the Paris Club. Now, the following report has more.
The approval was made during the Executive Board's meeting held on Wednesday following Ghana's receipt of financing assurances from the Paris Club and other bilateral creditors following the establishment of the Official Creditor Committee co-chaired by China and France. This comes months after Ghana sought help from international lenders to provide financing assurances, which is a prerequisite for the IMF's board to sign off the funds program for the country. Government is expecting the disbursement of the first tranche of $600 million within a week. The second and final tranches will be expected in the subsequent months after successful reviews of the program. Reacting to the approval, Professor John Gachi said Ghana is on track to see some correction in balance of payment deficits.
I think it's a welcome news. Welcome news because the government now has support for its policies. government credibility will be given to government fiscal policy measures that they put in place, because the IMF will serve as a police officer to guide the process and to monitor that things are done well. So to that extent, it's a welcome news. It's also welcome news because government will have some funding soonest to correct the balance of payment process as we go along, and that will have effect on the currency, and then we make frantic effort to structure the economy as we go along.
Professor John Gachi also reiterated calls for government to be more prudent in its fiscal policy direction.
The management of the finances have been so disastrous, and that should be the focus, to make sure we repair things that were not done well. We focus to ensure that true prudence is brought to bear in our financial management. So that is what is required. And while we do that, we should know that even if exchange rate comes to 7 cedis per dollar, inflation falls to even 8% within a quicker space, and we don't have growth, what we call inclusive growth, we aren't going anywhere. The temptation for government is to be looking at election ahead of them, and be thinking that this IMF program is going to provide some fiscal space, some attraction across board to the economy of Ghana, for which they want to borrow more and to do things. And that is a great temptation that the government must avoid.
Well, the International Monetary Fund is expected to hold a virtual press conference later today. You would want to stay with us here on CTTV at about 2:30 p.m. We'll be joining that virtual press conference to bring you the actual details of this particular agreement, and of course request that has been granted by the IMF for a $3 billion bailout. What we know is that immediately after this approval by the board, there will be a first tranche of $600 million that will be released and hopefully hits the accounts of the Bank of Ghana soon. Then there will be a review, and so hopefully somewhere in November, December of this year, we should be expecting another $600 million based on the outcome of that review.
Well, the government is committed to getting, from what we've heard, about 40% of this $3 billion. Already some analysts say the 600 million, which amounts to somehow about 20% of the entire amount that government is going to get, it's of the high, and indicates of some good negotiations on the part of government, or perhaps a good gesture from the IMF, depending on where you sit. And so we've maintained
also perhaps from the financial assurances from our external creditors.
Certainly. Yeah. So the factors may be enormous. We here have indicated that the IMF loan or facility is a necessity, is an essential thing that we have to attain, looking at where our economy has gone to. And so I think that everybody would have to appreciate the fact that this is at least temporarily a good one for the economy. Now, the other things has to do with how we progress as a country, and that this is our 17th time at the fund. And before going to the fund, we know the debates that came up, even
to go or not to go.
To go or not to go, the strong stance from government that it's a no-no, we are an independent country. We still have to insist on that idea and work towards, after leaving this credit facility, how we are going to manage ourselves, not only during the time we have during the time the credit facility exists, but after we move away from the fund. For me, next year is an election year, and so the data and statistics suggest that government sometimes, and successive governments sometimes throw caution to the wind when it comes to election year. And here's a government that is seeking to break the
caution to the wind with respect to its expenditure.
With respect to its expenditure. And so I think that the IMF and essentially government will have to make a difference when it comes to next year. Again, the issue about projects. We've seen a lot of projects who have indicated that their funding is necessarily tied to the fund. Talk about the Obichebi-Lamte interchange, talk about the Kumasi project, the Swami interchange. You've seen contractors grant interview and even government appointees grant interview to say that these projects had halted because the amount of money that was seeking from the fund had not yet been approved. The expectation is that now that these have been approved, then these projects will continue. But my concern here is that we should make sure that it doesn't become a ground for us to just embark on projects just for the sake of appealing to electorates because we are going into an election year. And I hope that the funds will be directed towards projects that we can get the maximum output from. Again, meeting subsequent conditions, you rightly indicated. Without meeting these subsequent conditions, the other monies may not be released.
A lot of stakeholders will actually be looking out for the conditionalities attached to this bailout, and then also be keeping an eye on government as to how it is going to ensure fiscal discipline.
Certainly, and talking about the conditions from the engagements that have been going, we know that issues about freeze of unemployment as part. There are conversations in certain quarters about increment in utility tariffs, which is also part. And
which we are seeing some already.
Which we are seeing some already. And so the other thing is, how would these conditionalities all be shifted towards the citizenry? Or will some also be on government?
Borne by the government itself.
Would there be a conditionality to say that government will have to bring down the size of government? Or government have to reduce its operational costs when it comes to running government? We have to look at it in that way, and it will be interesting. The press conference that will be coming out later, that will be the joint press conference between the government of Ghana and the staff of the IMF. But to complete my thoughts on this, already we've seen an interview, or a reported interview of a Minister of State at the Presidency for Finance saying that Ghana is hoping to go back to the capital market. We only hope that government would have learned something from our past and be careful with loans. And I'm sure that civil society and the Ghanaian citizenry, now having gotten that fair share of what economic indicators really mean, when inflation prices are going up, when they say debt is going up, when the exchange rate is not doing well, how it can easily affect your pocket. I'm sure that we will put eyes on the government to make sure that if government is borrowing, then it is borrowing prudently and using those monies for the right thing. My final point, which is dear to my heart.
I thought you had landed on the previous one as your final.
No, this is I left the last one very dear to my heart. The Financial Stability Fund for the banking sector. There's today I'm their spokesperson.
Self-appointed.
Yes, the banks are suffering, and all this debt exchange program.
But the banks insist they are solvent. We had the president of the Ghana Association of Bankers speak to this matter.
You saw the report that CTFM did recently.
And of course the editorial that Bernard has been doing on the point of view.
So listen to the editorial and go and listen to the interview.
But so what, the banks are living in self-denial?
You see, the facts are there. Last time I was on this platform, I told you that people went to withdraw monies and they are told that you will need 2 months before you can get your money. If I'm lying, anybody can come and say that I'm lying. But if you go to the bank, there are issues. And I'm saying that this Financial Stability Fund was to ensure that there's some liquidity so that the banks can make sure that, and the investment firms can make sure that when you need your money, they can readily give it to you if they don't have.
Well, the approval has come. We wait to see the application of a same. But drawing from the approval of the bailout request, the Ghana cedi
formed all other global currencies against the US dollar over the past 6 months, pushed by investor confidence in the country's potential approval for a $3 billion bailout from the International Monetary Fund. The following report looks at this further.
According to Bloomberg's currency tracker, the cedi's remarkable 33% gain since November marks the highest among approximately 150 tracked currencies. Investors have also enjoyed strong returns from Ghana's dollar bonds, delivering nearly 12% and surpassing the 3.6% average for emerging and frontier markets in the Bloomberg index. The positive sentiment surrounding the bailout has contributed to the cedi's recent strengthening, with expectations that it may trade below 10 Ghana cedis against the US dollar. This will assist in replenishing Ghana's foreign exchange reserves, which have declined by almost 50% since their peak in August 2021. This decline was primarily due to the central bank utilizing reserves to alleviate pressure on the cedi following the country's debt default. Meanwhile, similar market reactions have been observed in countries receiving IMF programs coinciding with immediate disbursement of funds.
Good news generally for the Ghanaian economy, good news for traders, good news for bulk oil distributors who will be needing more foreign currency or US dollars to ply their trade. I mean, good news across, but it should reflect. We've seen inflation also dropping. I mean, these are the signs you would pick from an IMF board approval, but how it is sustained is where the challenge really is.
You use the very right word. It should reflect.
It should reflect.
As to how it will reflect, so
yes.
there are macro indicators. It should reflect at
yes.
the micro
level.
Because
we sit back and we watch this, we hear this in the news, but we know what is in our pockets.
So when you go to the market and they've not reduced the price of tomato, and you are still paying a lot. If your wife goes to the market and she's still paying much for the chicken that she's buying, and the money that both of you are using to take care of the home is still at the high, and you cannot have
no reduction in it.
A lot of disposable income to talk about savings, then all these things that we talk about
makes no sense to
the ordinary Ghanaian. And so it comes to sustainability and consistency, that it won't be a one-time off thing. But we must say that over the past 2 months, we've seen some form of appreciation of the cedi against the major currencies, and that has in a way translated into the reduction in fuel prices, equally translating into the reduction in transport fares, which drivers are not willing to go according to, even though the GPRTU has come up with a statement. But moving forward, there have been a lot of recommendations on how we can put a check on the exchange rate, which includes looking at our imports level and going into manufacturing, talk about import substitution,
boosting the industrialization drive,
and targeting the big canker, the dollarization of the economy. Almost every single thing. You just pass behind here, go and see some house. You want to see if you can buy. They'll mention 200,000. You think, oh, 200,000. If I do this, I can pay. Then I say, oh, how much is the amount again? And the person says,
$200,000.
And then you see that, oh, no.
Reality just hits you in the face like that.
And so these are some of the things that we should be looking at as a people. That sustainably, we should make sure that our exchange rate indicators are on the right path.
And I think if we are making these gains, we should be extending it into other areas so that we can consolidate them on a national level and ensure that this economic revival that we are looking for really becomes a stay in the country. I'm saying this because in our next story, the PURC announced an increment in tariffs, electricity and natural gas, and they are telling us to bear with the Electricity Company of Ghana.
Now, the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission, that's the PURC, is urging utility consumers to accept the recent 18% tariff adjustment, citing the impact of the exchange rate and inflation. The Commission emphasized that the revision strikes a balance between supporting service providers and addressing economic challenges. Here's more on this report filed by Fred Duho.
During its quarterly reviews, the PURC observed the need to increase electricity tariffs due to factors such as consequently, the PURC settled on an 18.36% tariff increase to sustain the operations of the Electricity Company of Ghana. Dr. Eric Obute, the Director of Research and Corporate Affairs of the Commission, urged utility consumers to accept this adjustment. In an exclusive interview with City News, Dr. Obute explained that although the revision could have been higher at 37%, the PURC opted for a more moderate increase to support both service providers and consumers amidst the prevailing economic conditions.
Now, the utility has to be financially sustainable. They have to be financially viable to be able to keep the business afloat. At the same time, we also need to make sure that the tariffs are affordable for consumers, so they'll be able to pay up the tariffs. So we are there to balance the two sides of the equation. Now, if you look at the utility side, the tariff should have gone up beyond the 18.36%. But the hydro component, for instance, that we used the last time was 26%. This time around, hydro has been improved, so we're using about 29% in the generation mix. So the hydro component actually helped to dampen the tariffs. At the same time also, the commissioners or the board have taken into consideration the economic situation in the country, knowing very well that times are rough for everybody, both the consumer and the utility service provider. So in the wisdom of the commissioners, they think that, look, even though the tariffs are supposed to be at 100%, if we were to pay the full cost, which is the 100%, the tariff should have been more than, the rate should have been more than the 18.36% that we are supposed to pay.
Which should have been what?
Which should have been about 27.51%, which should have been the full cost of 100. But the commissioners decided that no, we should rather pay 18.51, so we can cushion the effect on consumers.
Meanwhile, the PURC has encouraged consumers to report any unsatisfactory service from utility providers to ensure that their payments align with the quality of service received.
The quality of service that you speak of, if the utilities do not inform you and they put off power, you are at liberty to report them to the commission. The commission will take action on that. There are issues bordering on the quality of service. For instance, your pole is broken, your light has not been on for days. If you report to the commission will immediately take action on that and call the utility to order. There are people whose houses even got bent, and when the commission makes investigations and realizes that it's the fault of the utility, they make the utility replace the cost of the house, or sometimes in any other cases they even give them back the whole house.
Well, there are a number of factors that go into the fixation of the tariffs, and the PURC as the regulator is the one that intervenes between the consumer and Now, during the previous tariff adjustment or the previous window for adjustment, the ECG wanted a particular rate or increase of adjustment. They were not given. The PURC, based on its own calculations, announced a figure they thought You see, I'm asking this because there's the notion that in this country, when things go up or prices of things go up, they never come down.
Oh.
Even when the factors that contributed to it.
If for nothing at all,
have they been effective?
I mean, but
yesterday was the effective.
But recently, there was a reduction, and they had adhered to it. At least the regulators within the space are trying to make when the consumer is come to the PRC, the PRC tariff adjustment regimes. They will ask for request providers, and these utility
and then they project to cover a certain period of time.
And then PRC would then take views of various stakeholders and then do its own analysis and come to its own conclusion. And then there's the quarterly tariff adjustment. Now, the quarterly tariff adjustment seeks to do two things. Utility company has been operating, has certain factors out of their control, led to an increment in their
The palace treated. Now to touch was definitely not for the faint of heart. We visited the Day 4, Part 2 every
You're welcome back. Let's yesterday.
To remove J. hold an application brought before it regarding
Michael Ankumanimfa, at the High Court in Cape Coast, Parliament. As an MP, since he had in his nomination as required by Article 94 was received by the Apex Court Chair Frank David of the court.
We have to protect felt all along. Was not qualified to have contested
no to Ghana's democracy. In a statement signed by
he was injuncted. They've not gotten any form of representation, and as a people who practice democracy, 60 and in 3 tranches. So
The Eastern Regional Police Command is currently investigating a brutal attack on students and teachers of Koforidua to 4 students from New Draben, and the school's chaplain has been strongly condemned by the school's management and alumni. City News.
On who said had left the New Draben school premises vandalized GV 81514 B caused damage to the roofs the boys' dormitory and the school's chaplain, who were seriously numerous stones and other objects at the scene of the
incident. I said we should rather
Tech has requested the cost of
800 polytank that used to serve the boys and